Hello there, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer, and on this podcast I am joined by my close associate, Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Charles Green and Imran Ahmad of the Terrace get together. That's right, we're going to take over at Rangers, skim off as much money as possible. I'm going to refer to Shaughan as a racial epithet and think there's nothing wrong with it, then have to apologise, and then get interviewed from a hospital bed, and then several years down the line, we'll both get paid a lot of money by the club.
Who was Imran again in terms of that entire scenario?
The only reason, because I put down, there's a very quick one, just a wee peek behind the curtain, because I put down Matt Hancock and Gina Coladangelo, you know, the woman that he was winching during the pandemic, and I thought to myself, I've definitely used that one in the past. So I had to come up with something else on the fly.
Because was there not a porn star that was involved at some point with Charles Green?
Oh, that sounds about right. Yeah, there might have been.
Just wondering if that was him.
No. Imran Ahmad, I mean, having seen the pictures of Imran Ahmad, I mean, he might be a porn star, but it's certainly not any kind of pornography that I'd want to tune into and express myself using. No.
Well, listen, we're all different.
Yeah, we're all, but not that different. Let's be honest, we're all different, but not that different. Now, Shaughan and I are going to be participating in our patented 3-game roundup of the Scottish lower leagues. I have recently set up an RSS feed to monitor any similar podcasts, and I'm pleased to report that the lesser content creators out there, they are terrified of litigation. And I hope it stays that way. Shaughan, we're going to be looking at one game from the Championship, another from League One, and a final fixture from League Two. We're going to try our best to have a laugh today, but we don't want to promise anything. I don't want to think anyone's tuning in believing they'll get something they won't. So I just want that disclaimer out there. We're going to try, but it probably won't happen.
And you're right to put that disclaimer in.
Yes. Before we start, Shaughan, how is everything?
I'm very well. There was something that happened to me earlier today that I'm not entirely sure how to process it. It'll pop up for you, I'm sure, on your social media channels. It's when there's some kind of reel, and it'll talk about actors playing roles in films where they've been a surprising age.
Okay.
And what I learned today is that I'm the same age that Christopher Lloyd was when he played Doc Brown in Back to the Future, the first one. And I suppose I wasn't entirely sure if I should be worried about that because of the fact I'm getting older and older, or perhaps happy the fact I don't look like a 72-year-old mad professor.
Well, to be fair, I'm going to assume he had a fair degree of prosthetics and he cut his hair that way to make him look slightly deranged. What's your excuse? Sorry.
But regardless, he looked older than 46 when he played that role in Back to the Future.
He did. I'm sure I was reading on Wikipedia. If I say it again, I mean, it's the first time we've discussed Wikipedia all show. I'm sure I read on Wikipedia that when they were making Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the age difference between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery was only something like 13 years.
Yeah.
So it's very strange for them to play father and son, but I mean, they did very well. It's a great movie, and I think what made it so good is their chemistry. I don't like reading about people's ages. The fact that I hurtle towards oblivion, I get more and more sensitive about it, and then feel that I just haven't achieved anything. In fact, I'm sure there was a website that you could put in your date of birth, and it told you what David Bowie had accomplished by that age, and it's just fucking miserable reading. I know that you never want to benchmark yourself against a genius like David Bowie, but nevertheless, like, I'm sure by the time he was 30, or even when he was younger than 30, he had done like Station to Station and the Berlin Trilogy. I mean, these are seminal albums. These are totems of 20th century modern rock music. I go on a podcast and talk about Annan.
That feels like an unfair comparison. You are the host of a reasonably successful late night regional television show. You host Scottish Cup events throughout the country. Did David Bowie manage that? No, that's a fair point. But David Bowie, when he was making the Station to Station album, he was so off his face in cocaine that he has no recollection of making it. He said that he knows it was recorded in Los Angeles because he's seen photographs himself at the time that tell him that he was in Los Angeles, but he can't remember making it. It's in my top 5 albums of all time. I absolutely adore it. I think it's incredible, but he can't remember making it, so fair play. It's actually one of my favourite David Bowie albums of all time as well. And as much as I like almost all of his back catalogue, if only he'd taken even more cocaine, we would have had even better albums.
I mean, to be fair, what came after Station to Station, I think Low came after that. Mm-hmm. So there's back-to-back tens. Then Heroes. Heroes, I don't think is quite good as Low, but Heroes is really good. Lodger. And then, was it Scary Monsters and Super Creeps? So yeah, he was amazing when he was on the drugs, amazing when he was off the drugs. Is there anything this man can't do?
He cannot present A View from the Terrace.
I think he'd have given it a really good go.
Especially now.
Especially now. Yeah, definitely not now. Yeah. But I had an interest, putting David Bowie to one side, I had an interesting incident of my own on Saturday. A real, do you know the bit in Jurassic Park where Dr. Alan Grant sees the Brontosaurus for the first time?
Yes.
And his face is just full of wonder.
Uh-huh.
I was round at my dad's house, and my dad and my stepmom are getting a summer house built out the back. So obviously it's the perfect time to get a summer house built just as we're approaching the freezing temperatures of winter. But they're getting a summer house built, and the guy whose company it is, he was visiting a number of sites. There's a couple of these buildings that are going up, and he was out visiting them. And he came in. He's obviously quite friendly with my dad and my stepmom. And they offered him a coffee. He said he was fine, but they asked him what you got on for the rest of the day. And he said, I've got another couple of site visits, and I'm going to the Stennismuir game. And genuinely, I was like, this is no joke. It's the first time I've ever met a Stennismuir fan out in the wild. It was incredible. You think all the Stenny fans I know, it's from going to the games and seeing them and seeing them in the wee bar and seeing the supporters bus. This was the first time actually coming face to face with someone. It was who also follows the club. It was just an incredible moment. Real, when doves cry. That's to imagine what it feels like. Brilliant stuff.
And did you chat for, I don't know, minutes, hours?
Yeah, just chatted for a bit. He had booked a table for hospitality for the Arbroath game at the beginning of the season. Thought we'd done really well, and he goes from time to time. So I think he'd have been quite happy with the 1-0 win over Montrose at the weekend. So yeah, just a great moment and a great feeling.
That's class. That's a new friend.
I say all right to him. I don't think
maybe.
I don't think he'd want to hang about with me. I think you'd look at me with my hair pulled back and you think, oh, nah.
He better do a really good job of that summer house, otherwise it could get very awkward if it's ramshackle and you bump into him at Oakview.
Oh, what do you think of Mikey Anderson's performance? Oh, it was like, yeah. The summer house, we're going to talk about that. No, I'm sure it looks absolutely cracking. The summer house looks absolutely cracking. So I'm sure that in 8 months' time they'll be able to put it to great use when it's warm enough to leave the house. But Shaughan, nevertheless, we have spent a lot of time talking about our personal lives and our personal tastes. Let's get into the football. And we'll kick off the show by looking at the biggest game from the SPFL from the weekend. And that was a top of the table championship clash between Livingston and Falkirk at Almondvale. Going into this match, Falkirk held a 6-point lead at the summit. This was quite literally a 6-pointer, but it was a 6-pointer that Livingston came out on top of. Fuck all happened in this game, apart from the goal. Let's be honest. I watched both sets of highlights, hoping that I think Livingston's about 4 minutes, Falkirk's highlights are about 6.5 minutes. Nothing happens other than the goal. But what a goal to win it. Teti Yengi's strike just before the interval. That was the only thing that separated the sides. And yes, I don't have many notes from this because there isn't a lot to discuss. But Shaughan, it's the biggest game, so we have to talk about it. What are your thoughts on Livingston 1, Falkirk 0?
This was disappointing on two fronts, I would say. So A, as you've already mentioned, it wasn't a great game. Teti Yengi's goal was outstanding. Not a lot else happened. I mean, in terms of, you're right, in terms of Falkirk's highlights lasted 6.5 minutes, but over a minute of that is Shaughan Elderbrand essentially doing a preview. As like the team's kind of setting the scene.
Yeah.
Not much happened at all. But I think what was also disappointing was
it anything to do with post-match interviews, perchance?
Yes. I was like, well, this has been rubbish. However, at least we'll have David Martindale. There'll be 8 or 9 minutes of interview with him. It generally says at least 2 or 3 interesting things. At least we can kind of investigate that a wee bit further and kind of extrapolate it a bit. 2.5 minutes of what's his name? Brian Chipper Rice. What's the point? You'd be no bothering.
I was the same, Shaughan. I was so disappointed. I thought, yeah, listen, terrible game of football. Let's get the interviews up. John McGlynn talks a wee bit at length. Brilliant. We'll hear from David Martindale. We'll get 10 minutes of David Martindale, but no. 2 minutes of Brian Rice with his monotone answers. How Livingston Football Club? How dare you? How dare you? You serve up a shit game on the pitch, and then you serve up some shit post-match interview as well with the assistant manager of all people. How dare you?
Do you know what I would say about Martindale in terms of his post-game comments? Didn't come from that interview. I saw it in might have been in the press, might be a Daily Echo interview or something. He was talking about the fact that the nullified Falkirk, totally agree with that. He was talking about the fact that he felt that the biggest difference between the two teams is that Falkirk have managed to turn draws into wins and Livingston haven't quite mastered that. I would totally disagree with that. In that Falkirk's wins this season have generally been quite convincing, generally been by more than a goal and generally been thoroughly deserved, whereas Livingston have had scored in the 91st minute at Starts Park to win the game, and it wasn't necessarily like a smash and grab, like it was quite even, fine. 91st minute against Airdrie to win the game, that they were the better team on the day. Second game against Wraith at Livingston, scored in the 95th minute. So actually I would say if either of the two teams are managing to kind of sneak wins out of draws, it's probably Livingston rather than Falkirk. But regardless, in terms of the game, I think most people were in agreement that it was a muck game that Livingston probably done very well in, and it's probably a compliment to both teams in that Livingston dragged Falkirk down. If you want to stop Falkirk playing, it's easier said than done. But I think Livingston done it very well, and I suppose ultimately that is a compliment to Falkirk because Livingston don't want to play an open game.
Mm-hmm.
So fair play to Livingston. How they won the game, how they went about going to win the game was they approached it well, and like neither keeper done very much. I thought Hogarth had one good save after the goal from maybe for Kelly. I thought he had a very good save.
Tipped over the bar.
Yeah, Pryor had very little to do at all, but a poor game that was decided by a kind of flash of brilliance.
Yeah, the goal itself was absolutely phenomenal. I think it's Leon McCann headers the ball, Dylan Tate collects it, but his touch, you think initially it's a good touch because he seems to take it into space, but Yengi with those long legs is able to take it off him. He comes in on his right foot and then just melts it. There's very little backlift in it, so it's incredible to generate that kind of power and that kind of trajectory. And Hogarth doesn't really have any chance of saving it because it's so supremely well struck. And as you say, that really was the only moment of the game that's really worth talking about. And I think that Yengi is quite a funny player. I think this is something that Rice alluded to in his post-match interview about how he's deployed. So I think that perhaps Yengi's better used through the middle where he can link play, but I think he's latterly been used like wide, and I think that Livingston's main attack, Stevie May, now is sort of spearheads the Livingston attack, so it's quite difficult for Yengi to get into the team, and when he is in the team, I think Yengi at his very best to his very worst, it can oscillate quite wildly. There are times, as we saw in this match here, where you think that's just such an incredible strike. There are very few players in the division that could do something like that. But then when you see him at his worst, the number of times he'll do something daft that's like flicks it, just have no chance of coming off, or the ball bouncing off his shins and getting away, or trying to take an extra touch that isn't there. This, however, was one of the moments where it did come off for him, so fair play to him. And the other thing I was going to add there, just on the point you made about what you knew Livingston were going to do, I don't know if it's comparable, but you remember the 2022-2023 season where Falkirk and Dunfermline were in League One together, and Falkirk just couldn't beat Dunfermline. And the games between the sides were really brutal. I think we did one of them in this podcast like 2 years ago, and basically the highlights amounted to a series of corner kicks. Yeah, very similar to this, and I don't know if Martindale has maybe sussed out a way of playing against Falkirk. If you can nullify the likes of Dylan Tate and Brad Spencer, cut the supply line effectively to the likes of Calvin Miller and to Aidan Nisbet and to Ross. I know Ross McKeever's still not 100% fit yet, but if you're able to cut the supply lines and then time waste and take the piss, really, then that's the way of beating them, because there's 2 games Falkirk haven't scored against them, and Falkirk haven't really looked likely of scoring against them in those 2 matches.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in terms of, I don't know if you noticed, but see all of the, like, John McGlynn made 5 substitutions, and the players that he took off was McKeever, so Ross McKeever, Ethan Ross, Aidan Nesbitt, Calvin Miller and Dylan Tate. So essentially the 5 most forward-thinking players in that team, because ultimately nothing really was happening. Very much kind of, I think by and large, like for like substitutions. And again, it didn't really have any kind of positive impact on how Falkirk were getting at Livingston. I do think, again, it is easier said than done in terms of stopping this Falkirk team. That there's a lot of chat about, John McGlynn talked about kind of physicality and height. I kind of get where he's coming from. I do think there's maybe a wee bit too much made of Livingston's height. Like, the back 4 are all over 6 foot. Teddy Yengi's very tall.
I think Will Nottingham.
He's tall. Yeah,
he must be huge.
6'4", 6'5", maybe.
Aye, he looks like a butler from a haunted house.
But I mean, everybody else, like Smith, May, Pittman, Kelly, Jamie Brandon, none of those players are over 6 foot. So in terms of height, doesn't really come into it. But in terms of, and I know that I'm saying that Falkirk are lazy by any stretch of the imagination, but see in terms of work rate, see in terms of closing players down, see in terms of pressing, that's where those players certainly come into their own. And you used to see it. You used to see it at Wraith to a degree. And as much as John McGlynn had a couple of good race sides in the second tier, I do think this Falkirk team is probably a wee bit better. Mm-hmm. But I do think they also have the same failings. If you don't give them time on the ball, if you don't allow them to play good football, then what is plan B? And I don't think Falkirk necessarily had an answer to that on this occasion.
That's been a long-standing criticism of McGlynn, though, hasn't it? It's just there is he likes playing one way of football. The John McGlynn 2.0 since he came back from Celtic, it is very front foot football where you want to get your ball players into the ball. You want to nice short passing, then suddenly spring for the fast players to run to. And when it looks good, it is really exciting. It was like a lot of kinds of football, isn't it? When it works, it's brilliant. When it stops working, it's not great. But yeah, I think that maybe it's a blueprint that other teams can look to be inspired from. I don't think that'll make for necessarily good football. I think that I saw there was one comment on Pie and Bovril where a Falkirk fan said, and I don't know why you'd want to write this in the public domain, but he said, and you probably know what I'm going to say here, is that he would rather his team finish second in the league than watch his team play football like Livingston do. And I'm not sure if that's just the nature of you just get a bit upset because your team's been defeated, and it's very easy to be like a wind-up merchant online. But surely you can't be serious. I mean, that kind of football, you can tolerate that kind of football if it bears results.
I mean, I'd be interested to hear his opinion if this was a game in League One, for example. So he would be happy to not win League One, but play great football rather than play a bit more long ball or a bit more direct or a bit more defensive, I suppose. No, I'd listen, everybody's different. Not for me, that kind of attitude. It was interesting in terms of John McGlynn. I think sometimes McGlynn can give off answers that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but I thought he was quite magnanimous afterwards in terms of the fact that they didn't win the battle.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said about a blueprint for other teams to follow, I don't know if many other teams can do that though, because just in terms of the middle of the park that Livingston have, like not many teams have somebody that's as good as Scott Pittman.
Yeah.
Like we talk about Dylan Tate, we talk about Brad Spencer. I think Pittman might be in the same equation in terms of one of the better midfielders.
You've been saying that this season, aye.
Yep, and Kelly as well, who's maybe not impressed as much, and Jamie Brandon is kind of protecting that back 4. So yes, it is a blueprint. I don't know if many other teams would be able to use it and apply it though to stop Falkirk. I
did like McGlynn's post-match interview, the things he was asked about. Obviously, like we don't crucify ourselves. You know, if they go in 9 points ahead, the league's not won. If we're 3 points ahead, it's not lost. And he's absolutely right. I mean, no one's ever won a league title in November, and it's not, you forget sometimes where Falkirk have come from. I mean, this is only their first season back in the Championship after 5 years, and they're having an absolutely smashing time of it. This is like 18 months of like unparalleled good times coming at the Falkirk Stadium. But sometimes you just do need to take a step back and think, we've just been promoted from League One. There are going to be potholes ahead in the road. And you would say to Falkirk, I mean, they're playing Queen's Park on Friday night. Any time this season there have been disappointments that they've been able to bounce back quite quickly. In fact, immediately, even I'm sure, when they lost to Wraith Rovers, am I right in saying that the next game they played Ayr United and they beat them 2-0? And I think they were the first team to beat Ayr United. So they're certainly a resilient bunch, and there are some players in this Falkirk team that will certainly in the league, have never experienced like back-to-back defeats. It's just a completely different thing for them. So I think that Queen's Park will be a difficult opposition on Friday night, even although that they probably took a bit of I think the 3-2 scoreline against Ayr United from the weekend is perhaps a bit flattering towards Queen's Park with those 2 late goals going in. I think there'll be a test for Falkirk at Hampden, but I do think that this is a game you'd massively fancy Falkirk to win and bounce back from. A team of Falkirk's calibre playing on that big pitch at Hampden, you could see them reprising the game early in the season when they beat Queen's Park 2-1.
Yeah, I think so. And again, a big compliment to Falkirk, because Queen's Park away is one of the harder tests that you're going to have, but ultimately I do think that Falkirk will have too much for them on the evening.
Do you think Queen's Park away is a difficult game?
Yeah, I think so.
Like away, but it's at Hampden, so it's not as if they're... I'm trying to think that like other grounds. It's not like you're at Somerset Park or Capello where the crowd they're quite close on top of you. Whereas at Hampden is at about a third of the stadium is open. The south stand's open for fans.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't checked Queen's Park's home record, but ultimately you are away from home against, because it feels like the Championship is now very much again a top 5 and bottom 5, and as much as maybe somebody will be able to gate crash the top 5, I'm not so sure. But regardless, I do think Queen's Park are one of the better teams in the division, so I do think it is a really good test. It'll be interesting to see how Falkirk get through it.
Queen's Park have lost once at home this season, and that was against Partick Thistle.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. I'm talking fucking shite. There you go. Queen's Park away is a difficult place to go. It is a difficult place to go. So fair play. Just check who Livingston have got coming up. I should have had this written down.
Think it's play Airdrie?
Well, there we go then. There's a perfect opportunity to keep the heat up on Falkirk. I mean, if Falkirk say drop points, if it's a draw or a defeat, you would massively fancy Livingston to, I would say, stick a couple past them. You probably buy a 2-0 win over Airdrie on Saturday. It feels like Airdrie 7 points behind at this stage. I mean, they are massively cut adrift already, and very difficult to see them on current form anyway clawing that back.
Aye, so that last time I watched them, whether it was 3 weeks ago at a midweek game at Starts Park, I thought they were awful. I mean, Wraith, to be fair, weren't much better, but Rovers did win 1-0. But I do think that they are potentially, maybe like the Arbroath side that got relegated for the Championship. I do think they're as bad as them. That there is very little to be positive about in terms of this Adrian side. Just a team, a squad ultimately that is not good enough for this level of football.
Yeah, there's a good bonus podcast that Craig Fowler recorded with Emma Quigley from the Only the Lonely podcast, the Airdrie's podcast. If you do want to listen to it, do subscribe to the Patreon. I'd listened to it on my way to work this morning, and the concern, listen to it yourself actually. You don't need me and Shaughan to go about it, but certainly I think the Airdrie's big problem, they've got some 9 or 10 players, good players out injured who would come in and augment a lot of the teams in that division. So very difficult to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. But even so, I don't really think Rhys McCabe's really making much at the moment. If I was in his factory and I was a supervisor, I'd be like, Rhys, where's the fucking purses? I'd be keen to know what he had to say.
I've given you several sow's ears.
I've given you, yeah. Can we at least see some semblance of a...
Where are the silk purses?
A pouch to hold coins? And if he said, if he don't know, I'd beat him with cane. Is there anything else, Shaughan, to be said about Livingston 1, Falkirk 0?
I don't think so. I don't know if this game even told us much about the two of them. I just think it will be. If anything, I've always said that Livingston, even before the season started, I fancied Livingston for the title. I'll still stick with that. But I am starting to wonder if the team that is more likely to drop points in other games against the rest of the teams in the division, that I'm starting to think that Livingston will drop more points than Falkirk between now and the end of the season. So I'm not sure about my Livingston suggestion, but I'll stick with it just now.
So are you saying we're going to see Livingston win at the weekend then against Airdrie?
Yes, but it won't be. Again, I don't think it'll necessarily be straightforward. Maybe go 2-0 with a second goal coming late in the game to seal the 3 points.
Well, there you go. There's the biggest game that took place in the SPFL on the weekend, and Shaughan and I have been able to bring absolutely zero insight into it, so we can only apologise. What we perhaps should have been speaking about, Shaughan, was Great Morton 3, Wraith Rovers 2. What on earth happened there?
I thought the first half was as bad as Wraith Rovers have played in years. Like, literally. As much as they created a number of half chances, defensively they were terrible. They were slow, they were ponderous, they were sloppy. Just didn't really, nothing. There was no element of the team that was functional at all. Morton were probably the better side in the first half, albeit probably created fewer chances, but they were clinical. Certainly took advantage of the chances that they got. Second half, Neil Collins argued that it was an excellent second half performance. Admittedly, I'm not Neil Collins' biggest fan. I would disagree with that though. I thought for about 35 minutes there was more of a, and I hesitate to use this expression, but certainly more of a desire, greater work rate, because he brought in subs. And just everything was a wee bit quicker. The tempo was a bit quicker. It wasn't as if we suddenly become a very good football team. It was just everything was being performed well at a higher tempo, and so Morton were struggling to cope with that. And as much as they were improved in the second half, I refer back to something I said about the Partick Thistle game. Wraith played well, but in terms of their goal, it took whatever it was, a 25-30 yard free kick from Dylan Eason. The goals from the Morton game, it was an own goal and a penalty. So if you never score goals from open play, you're going to achieve nothing.
Yeah.
So we'll probably talk about Neil Collins and the Patreon later on. But no, wasn't impressed by Wraith Rovers at all. Did Morton deserve to win the game? No, but they were clinical and Wraith Rovers weren't, and you have to say fair enough.
No, and just imagine you at the end of the game just shaking your fist really hard at Michael Garrity and Philip Superevich. And you're telling the other guys, come on guys, shake harder.
I just left. I just left.
Fair enough.
Lots of people around me clapped. I didn't clap. I just left.
Oh no. You never clap after conceding a last minute goal.
I certainly don't.
Oh no. Only chumps do that. Oh, good game, guys. Unlucky. Fuck off. Hopefully, Andy Millen was just doing sort of DX chops at Andy Barrowman. Yeah.
So as far as we were,
he's a bit of gossip.
So as far as we were, Andrew Barrowman wasn't there. I could be wrong.
Oh, shat it.
I believe you had a weekend away, so couldn't make the Morton game. However, funnily enough, Andy Millen, as soon as that last goal went in to put Morton 3-2 up, he was very much looking up at the kind of where the board sat. Yeah. And he was very much getting at get it right up you sign. So fair play. Did burst out laughing at that. He holds a grudge, and then quite right.
Andy Barrowman was taking the mattress off the bed and pushed it up against the door when he saw the full time, tilted all the blinds, just made sure, start with a kitchen knife in his lap until dawn, just to be in the safe side that no one was coming round to his house. But Shaughan, we'll put violence to one side and we'll go into League One. But before we talk about a featured match, I think it's important that we address the big news from the division from this week. On Tuesday, Dumbarton went into administration. They've been deducted 15 points and they immediately fall to the bottom of the division with 0. Their points total has been wiped out. Now, this story, it was initially broken on Monday night by The Sun, and the club formally announced they got into administration the following day. and I think you might need to correct me, the club had sold some land in 2021 and had not been paid for it, and the lack of funds essentially has plunged the club into administration. They'd been going hand to mouth. I'm sure Fraser Clark's spoken about it. They'd gone hand to mouth for some time now. Everyone employed by the club, that's the players, the management team, non-football staff, they'll all be kept on for the time being. Their jobs are safe, but the administrators are assessing all their options available to the club. And goes out saying that Dumbarton, they are the second club in League One to go into administration. Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, the same plight befell them 6 weeks ago. And while we mentioned Fraser Clark, he has recorded a Patreon with Fowler. Please go and listen to that, because I've no doubt it'll be a good listen. Fraser's very, very good at the lower leagues, but he's especially good when it comes to Dumbarton. I think while Dumbarton finances have been a shambles, it's like an open secret about how bad they've been. This to me came out of nowhere when it dropped. I was like, oh wow, I saw it coming but didn't see it coming at the same time.
Yeah, I mean you've summed that up perfectly well. So it completely came out of the blue on Monday evening, but by the same token, it didn't come out of the blue, because it feels like almost for all the time, I've maybe been on Pie and Bovril for, I don't know, 12, 13 years or whatever. It always feels like Dumbarton's off-field concerns, their boardroom concerns have been a thing. Like a lot of, if you go to Dumbarton's thread, it's generally stuff about what's happening in the boardroom, what's happening kind of off-field. And obviously, you and I know a lot less than Fraser. But for what I pick up, it always feels like they have people on the board or in charge of the club who have far more interest in the land surrounding the rock, or even that the football pitch sits on, rather than the football club itself. So as much as Monday came out the blue, because normally when, like, whether it's been Dundee or Dunfermline or Hearts or Inverness, there's normally been some kind of rally about we need to raise some funds, and that hasn't happened on this in this case. And to be fair, maybe those funds, because I did wonder about Inverness when they were raising funds about, well, is this going into a black hole, for example? Mm-hmm. So I didn't really have an issue with that, but the fact that it was revealed by a tabloid newspaper on the Monday night probably wasn't ideal. But you're right. It seems like the final straw is the fact that they sold off development land in 2021, or at least the owners did, rather than the club. The owners did, and they've yet to receive a penny. And I think there's like a kind of outstanding first payment of $300,000. Yeah, haven't seen a penny of that. So that's plunged them into administration. I suppose what we don't know at this point is whether some of the board members have decided this is the best way to approach it, because maybe they want to get rid of what they feel is bad apples on the board. Not entirely sure. Yeah,
that seems to be the consensus. The one Dumbarton fan that I've spoken to, Fraser Clark, who I would trust in these instances. You know, he's a very level-headed boy, even when it comes to talking about his own football team. But I think from speaking to him, he seems cautiously optimistic about what the future holds. And yeah, that's is because when happens to Hearts or Rangers or Dundee or Dunfermline, they've got big supports and they're full-time clubs, and you can imagine that's more viable to put money into than it is to a smaller team like Dumbarton. However, he's cautiously optimistic because I think it will get to the bottom of who actually owns Dumbarton, because that's been a bit of a mystery for about 15 years now, longer than that. I don't know if you watched Scotland Tonight with John Mackay last night.
I didn't know.
Fraser was on that. It was brilliant to see him. Did very well on it. So I've been doing the rounds. He was what was he on? I think he was on Drive Time on BBC Radio. He was on Scotland Tonight last night, and he was also on the BBC Scotland football podcast this morning.
So somebody mentioned to me that they were. Karen mentioned to me that he was talking about soil samples on the podcast.
That's right. Yeah, I think the reason that they're not able to actually build houses on the land because the soil sample they haven't been analysed. Because if they were to analyse it, they'd be like, oh shit, this land's actually worthless. Like, you know the bit at the end of There Will Be Blood where Daniel Plainview tells Eli Sunday that all the oil's been, like, he's drunk his milkshake effectively. All the oil's been had. That's what that Norwegian fella would be told. But nevertheless, it's good to see Fraser get his big moment, albeit in difficult circumstances. I compared him to Paul Burrell getting break to stardom after the death of Princess Diana. very difficult circumstances, but some good did come out of it. Namely, Paul Burrell's celebrity career, and hopefully Fraser Clark can go and eat a kangaroo testicle on I'm a Celebrity. Get me out of here.
Do you remember Paul Burrell just sticking his hand into like kind of creepy things on I'm a Celebrity? He was really scared. Really scared, wasn't he?
He was good value. You sometimes know early doors watching I'm a Celebrity, like, this cunt, we're going to go to Scotland and bully them. The whole nation at one time looks, we are going to bully them. Do you remember Gillian McKee?
Remember she just fainted?
Yeah.
She never really fainted.
She just got over it. She fell over. Oh my goodness, yeah. The nation just takes one look at someone and says, yeah, we're putting you on toast. But nevertheless, as we mentioned there, Fraser has recorded a Patreon with Fowler, so go and subscribe to that, because I would say it'll be very, very good. And again, needless to say, I really hope Dumbarton get themselves out of this hole. And it's not at the expense of their place in the SPFL, and it's not at the expense of losing the Rock or anything like that. Because they're a team. Dumbarton are a team that I really quite like and quite admire. I like sharing division with them. I like going to the Rock. The fans, every time I go there's some people that you kind of recognise and have a chat away with for 5-10 minutes. So it's always a good place. Always like going there. So hopefully they can sort themselves out.
Aye, same. I've seen some oddly great, like, Wraith Rovers Dumbarton games at Dumbarton are generally exceptional. I've seen some great games there. And seeing just in terms of the backdrop, in terms of walking to the stadium, and you've got the kind of rock and the castle behind it. A great kind of backdrop, great walk to a stadium. And I hope Fraser's right. But as you kind of mentioned, other teams that have kind of went into administration in the last whatever it is couple of decades, they've either had good fan bases or large fan bases, sorry, or in Inverness's case, they've got someone like Alan Savage, who obviously has a bit of money, and you would expect Alan Savage to be able to kind of steer them away for this mire that Inverness find themselves in. Dumbarton, it feels like Dumbarton have neither. So I think you can become quite blasé about teams going into administration, because generally speaking, they get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I am a wee bit worried about Dumbarton's plight, and this kind of the complexities around the land and who owns what. Like that isn't going to be a quick fix. So I would imagine they'll start next season on negative points. I don't think this is going to be a quick turnaround time at all. But regardless, as you say, fingers crossed they get through it as well as can be expected and come out of it the other side in a far healthier place than they are now.
Yeah, I did. I think this one, of all the administrations, the teams that you've mentioned, like Rangers, well, obviously Rangers will get out of it. Sadly, they did. Hearts, Hearts will get out of it, like Dundee, Dunfermline. But with Dumbarton, especially as a fan of a small team who have shared the division with Dumbarton, it feels very close to home. Yeah. Because all it means is, like, if you've got like somebody who takes an interest in your football team, not for getting involved with football reasons, because thinking that the ground is on a valuable piece of land that they can make money from, that's quite a scary proposition. I think that's a scary proposition. If it can happen to them, then it can happen to a lot of teams. When you look at, for instance, like East Stirlingshire with their ground, with Alan Mackin looking to sell on First Park for development for retail, that never happened, and ultimately First Park went to ruin. The club jobbed around. They shared at Oakville View, now they're sharing at Falkirk. Probably of all the teams that have gone into the SPFL, the most likely to drop into the East of Scotland division. And that's a scary prospect. And that, I'm not saying the Shire went into administration, but you know what I mean. These are the things that can happen if there's bad decisions made at executive level. That the knock-on effects can be very serious for clubs.
Yep, very much so.
But anyway, perhaps we'll go on to our featured match, and it stars one of the teams who are perhaps absolutely delighted with the news that Dumbarton went into administration, because it means they're probably not going to finish bottom. It's Annan Athletic 0, Kelty Hearts 2, and it was 2 goals in the space of a minute from Scott Williamson and Connor Allen gave Michael Tidzer's team the win, and it catapulted them to the top of the division. I mean, that means fuck all, really, because the league's still a shambles. I mean, and that's still a shambles, even if 2 of the teams have points deductions. And Kelty are 8 points ahead of Annan in 8th place, which seems ridiculous, the fact that it's so condensed and and so compacted. But Shaughan, what did you make of Annan Athletic 0, Kelty Hearts 2?
See, the first thing I noticed, I didn't hear that lady who I think must sit about the halfway line and shouts, "Come on, Annan!" I tell you what, if she's lost interest in Annan, are in a bad way.
You could hear her from time to time. I mean, she was still there.
Oh, really? I didn't hear her at all.
Oh, no. You could hear her.
Well, I'm glad she's still there. And in terms of the game itself, it was interesting. Like Willie Gibson, and I suppose that this is an issue that player managers have. We've spoken in the past about Scott Brown, for example, who might throw somebody under a bus in his post-match interview. Willie Gibson kind of threw himself under a bus.
Very much so. I think his post-match interview, he said that he talked about accountability, and he says that that's something he's big on, is players being responsible for their actions. And he said, and it's very honest, it's not something that you hear very often, but he said, I had to score. And it was a chance at 0-0. Kelty are trying to play the ball out from the back. I think it's Billy Owens in the middle of the park, takes a heavy touch. Gibson robs him. He's through on goal, but it's too powerful a shot, and it goes over the bar. He scores that. It's 1-0. Game completely changes, but instead the game goes the other way, and Kelty get those 2 goals, the rat-a-tat. And it was interesting to hear Gibson talk about the big moment in the game, and that was his fault effectively. Yeah,
and Tidser, to his credit, was like he kind of said at halftime he wasn't overly enamoured at his Kelty side's performance, despite being 2-0 up at the interval. I thought both goals, though, kind of demonstrated exactly why Kelty are top of the league at this moment in time. So, like the first goal, like I know there was only a couple of minutes or a minute maybe between goals, but like Williams' finish at the first one was very, very good. However, although there was still work to be done between the halfway line and his finish, see Craig Johnson's work, just in terms of winning the ball back on the halfway line, it kind of closed down the opponent, wins the ball back, and it's from there that they go on to score that first goal. Then in terms of the second goal, it's just a really good break. Like Williamson, like is quick, so he advances, and like he doesn't panic. I think he realises at one point, right, actually I now have defenders in front of me. Do I have anybody else who is assisting me here? But his advance is very good, but his through ball that kind of splits the entire defence to Connor Allen. And yes, I'm not entirely sure how the finish ends up in the back of the net, but regardless, the move is very good.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I had to watch it back about 3 or 4 times, and I was thinking, I really hope that was a pass and not a shot.
I thought it was a pass, but
I thought it was a pass as well. Williamson does incredibly well there to get the better. I think it's Paul McGuigan loses possession, and then he's right up there. And I mean, you should be outpacing a 41-year-old Paul McGuigan. let's be honest. But regardless, he does well to hold it up and just wait for Allen's run and the ball. And I'm going to choose to believe it was a pass, because it's so well timed, and I think it does take a wee nick off someone's foot. But nevertheless, it's really good play. However, I think that both goals are well taken, and there are things to like about both goals, but I think that it just sums up the problems that Annan have got at the moment. I mean, that first goal, Williamson, yes, very good finish, but I think it's Reece Breen effectively tees him up, just doesn't deal with Brodie Patterson's cross, and effectively heads the ball down to his feet, and he steers it into the net, because you've got players come down, and to hit a shot like that accurate, very well done, but it's teed up for you. And that second one, it's like, how on earth do Annan lose? They're attacking, they've taken kick-off, they've gone right up the park, they immediately lose the ball, and then they're on the back foot, and that effectively kills the game, because it feels like at the moment, if Annan, and this is something that Gibson alluded to in his interview, in fact maybe not alluded to, maybe said outright, goals have been a massive problem for them this season. I'd look there, 5 goals in their last 10 matches they've scored. There's not much of a goal threat at all in that team, and it felt as though that when they went 2 behind, very unlikely for them to have come out it.
Yeah, and I've got sympathy. I like Aidan Smith. I think Aidan Smith is a decent forward who is essentially now leading the line. But I do think in terms of maybe what their entire game plan, certainly in terms of the final third this season was, and quite rightly, was feed Tommy Goss. if you give Tommy Goss the ball, he will probably score you goals. I mean, he started off the League Cup campaign quite well. I think he maybe scored 2. Can't remember. He certainly scored 1 against Dundee. Then he started the season quite well. I think he scored the winner against Inverness and maybe set one up in the other game. Then he was injured, came back for a couple of weeks and is injured again. And then Gibson said afterwards that, like, he was asked about what's the injury situation with Goss, and he said I think he said a tear in his knee, and they have no kind of time frame in terms of when he'll be back. And when he is, I think he is totemic in terms of Annan. If he's missing for the bulk of this season or for a chunk of the season, then they're in a wee bit of bother. Because I do think they do play decent football, like between the thirds. I think they're struggling defensively. I think they're struggling in the final third. I do think they can play decent football in between that. But if you can't keep the ball at the net and you can't score goals, then you're probably going to go down.
I agree with a lot of that. Having seen Annan twice this season, I think they're the poorest team that I've seen in the division. I thought they were especially poor when I went to see them when they drew 1-1 with Stennismuir at Galabank, and I know that might be sour grapes, or I'm unhappy that they stifled my own team from winning. It's not the case. I just didn't think they had much invention there. They got I think it was a poor save from Darren Jameson, sort of parried it out in front of the striker's feet to score, and then immediately afterwards Smith fluffed a really good chance to go 2-1 up. I think you're right in what you say there, where and guys like Gibson, Josh Todd, Paul McGuigan, guys who are just like fundamentally good football players, guys who are really good at keeping the ball, technically good players, but they do miss Goss, and Goss is quite a limited player in a lot of regard. I like him. I really like him, and I was relieved when he wasn't playing against us, because he does seem to do all his best work against Stennismuir. But without him, he's like a big wrecking ball up front. Yep. He's the sort of player that can. Anyone who watched Gosses know what he's good at. He'll run into defenders. He's just disruptive. He's like a child who's been kept back, a child who is just really aggressive and angry, and it's been kept back a couple of years. That's what he's like. And he's making fun of the teacher. He's like throwing things around the class. The teacher can't contain him because he's too big, and he keeps going like that to the teacher. What are you fucking saying? And when he's not there, I just don't think they carry the same threat. Smith, a player you've touched on, I like him, but Smith wants to play his football out wide. He wants to play in the left. It's like for listeners who've not seen him, Vinicius Junior. He wants to play on the left and then come in field, where you need to do a lot of work to get Smith onto the ball. Whereas with Goss, you can sometimes just boot it up the park and then push the team up from there. But you don't have him. You've got to be a bit more cerebral, and I just think they're quite a slow team. And I know that the ball got caught under McGowan's foot for the second goal there, but I think that's just endemic. They're just a wee bit too slow as a team. There's not a lot of pace there, and I don't think they defend particularly well. The 5-1 game at Ochil View, the first meeting between the sides, the goals that Stennismuir scored that day, I think that all 5 of them could have been preventable. They were Annan just defended horrendously. It was a lot of stuff like what we saw from Breen at the weekend there, where somebody just doesn't clear their lines, or somebody takes or nicks off someone, but just falls perfectly for a Stennismuir player to finish. A lot of the goals that I think Annan have lost that season have come from moments like what we've seen from Breen there.
It was interesting. I don't know if you listened to Michael Tidzer's post-match stuff. I know we've spoken about Tidzer previously a few times this season about how he comes across. I quite listened to him. It was something I don't know if I've ever heard a manager say before, and he was talking about how he felt the first half was scrappy. He was kind of annoyed at his players, even though they were 2-0 up. Didn't feel that they didn't necessarily perform that well. But one of the elements that he'd mentioned, which presumably was why they couldn't get things going, was he said there wasn't a lot of goal kicks.
I noticed that as well.
I've never heard a manager say that before. I don't know if he just means that part of their tactics is that they build out from the back, and part of that starts from a goal kick. I didn't really know what he meant. Maybe I was reading too much into it.
No, I certainly clocked it as well. It was one of those, squeeze me. You've got to go back and rewind it to just make sure that what you've heard. But yeah, that's in my head. I was trying to work out, what does that mean? Does that mean you need to have do we need Rory McAdams being the first person to touch the ball? Otherwise it doesn't count. But no, very interesting. I suppose for Kelty, we've spoken at length about Kelty. I'm not sure how much more there is to say about Kelty. That they are a good side. They've all the constituent parts are there. I thought that Kelty, I was writing about them for a view from the terrace. Ultimately, what I wrote about wasn't taken forward. But I had assumed that it's effectively guys who are like 18, 19, 20 with a spine of older players. It's not the case. I think a lot of this Kelty team, I think there's maybe Tidser might be the oldest player in the team, obviously player manager. I think O'Ware might be 30 or 31, and the rest of the team are all around. There's some youngsters, but it's quite a broad spectrum of ages. A lot of guys in their mid-20s, so it's not quite a team full of youngsters that I thought they were.
Yeah, he was very. I think there's an interesting player in terms of left back and Brodie Patterson. He was very
good player, man,
and enthusiastic about him. And I kind of got the impression that he was. I mean, not that you are ever putting your, I presume not putting your players in the shop window, but I was kind of got the impression he was saying that he could play at a far higher level. I know Patterson he played. I can't remember who he played against, but he certainly played as a trialist for Wraith in a friendly. And I thought he'd done pretty well, and we wondered if he would be brought in as a permanent signing. It might have been Ian Murray's first season, no sure. It might have been at that point they went to Hartlepool. Regardless, whatever. He spoke about the fact that he brought him in. He was already good, but now he's very, very good. So that might be somebody who can make a step up, whether that's with Kelty or somebody else in Championship.
Certainly, that's the times where I've seen Kelty twice. I think that the first time when they beat Stennismuir 2-0, they were very good. When Stennismuir beat them 2-1, I think Stennismuir were the better side in that game. And the fact if Kelty had taken anything from it, I think it would have been a bit of a travesty. But we'll talk about the 2-0 game from earlier in the season, because a lot of the stuff that we've touched on, you've described there, like two very good fullbacks in Patterson. Patterson, I think that Tidser's right. Of all the fullbacks in the division, I think Patterson's the best. I think that Scott Mercer on the other side, we spoke about on a Patreon podcast, very reliable player, good defender, someone who's going to chip in going forward as well. But I think all the players in that team, they all look just a really well coached side. Like everyone's really comfortable on the ball. And I think what they always try to do, it's 1-2 touch football. It's very much you pass the ball and then you move into space. So there's always angles for the players to move into. And then you couple that with two of I don't think there's any like harder working strikers in that division than Scott Williamson and Craig Johnson. And every time we speak about them, they say the same thing. They look an absolute nightmare to play against. I mean, you saw like that. I think it was like right at the start of the game. There was a moment. I think it's Johnson hunts someone down. I mean, it ultimately doesn't come to anything, but it's just that aggression and just not allowing the players to settle in the ball. If you can disrupt that and then give the ball to like your like Luke McCarville's or your Michael Tidser. I know Tidser wasn't playing at the weekend, but just generally you give it to guys like who are good balls players. You force those mistakes. Very difficult to get it back off them again because they're so comfortable at it. And I think they're having a really good season. I saw, again, just flicking through Pie and Bovril during an idle moment today, that Airdrie fans were wondering if Rhys McCabe was to go, who would you fancy coming in? And Tidser's name was someone that came up, and I was actually thinking that might not be a bad shout because it feels like you're replacing like for like there between McCabe and Tidser. But certainly for the time being, I'd very much stay at Kelty Hearts. He looks like he's really on to a good thing with them.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting who would be interested to the Airdrie job, and so let's say it happened in a couple of weeks that McCabe was relieved of his duties. Would Tidser fancy that? Because I think that's a poor Airdrie squad. That there might be more chance of Kelty being in the Championship next season than Airdrie. So that I suppose money would attract them. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, definitely. But will Kelty Hearts finish the season top of the division? I've absolutely no idea.
Might finish 6. Who knows?
Who knows? But it's interesting. 3 of the teams in the top 4 all playing maroon.
There you go. That's exciting.
Fuck you. Right, we'll move into League 2. And this is a class game, actually. We're finishing. We're definitely finishing on a high. Our final game of the podcast took place in the northeast of Scotland. Peterhead took on Edinburgh City at Balmoor, and the citizens secured an unexpected victory. Connor Young, as he has been so often this season, he was the hero, scoring a hat-trick for Edinburgh and a Dylan Forrest penalty and a really, really nice goal. That's actually my favourite goal of the weekend from Seb Ross that got the consolation goals for the Blue Toon. And Peterhead, that defeat means they've fallen from first to second. They're now behind Elgin City. But Edinburgh, my God, third win on the bounce, and they're just 1 point from the promotion playoffs. I mean, and relatively speaking, they are having an absolutely supreme season. So delighted to see. And Shaughan, this looked, going by the highlights posted by Peterhead, I think the package is about 10, 11 minutes long, looked like a really good game of football. And both managers, Michael McIndoe and Jordan Brown, after the game, were very complimentary about one another's styles. And I think that was something that we saw in this game here. It looked like a lot of fun.
No, you're right. And they were right in terms of being complimentary about each other. I think in terms of, and again, we probably watch most lower league highlights packages every week, if not all. I don't know if I've watched a game this season where one team has been on top so much but ended up getting no points for the game. Because certainly for the second half, so let's say the second half lasted 5-6 minutes in terms of the highlights. All of those minutes took place in essentially Edinburgh City's final third. It was just Peterhead pushing for the equaliser, which they got reasonably close to the start of the second half, and then pushing for the winner. And then ultimately, Uzi C's introduction, the most handsome man in Scottish football, set up Connor Young for the winner. But I mean, geez, I think Peterhead could feel hard done by. And in terms of the post match stuff, couldn't help but laugh at Jordan Brown. So not only does he look like Joe Sked, I don't know if you noticed, he scratches his head like Joe Sked as well, which is slightly scary. Like how he kind of scratches like just above his ear, slightly scary. But him trying to give a post match interview and be like not dismayed, but just be like disappointed at the result, disappointed at how the fact that as much as they performed well, they need to be switched on. He was disappointed at the fact that it was a game where the momentum had kind of ebbed away, and all the time in the background, "Horny" by Moose T is playing is playing above his words. It's very difficult to keep a straight face during that interview, but fair play to him.
That's an interesting observation, not so much about "Horny" by Moose T, but just that he said something there. It's like when you're playing against your Elgins, your East Fife and your Spartans, he said something along those lines, and I'm not sure if they might have underestimated Edinburgh going into this, judging by what he said there. I'm not sure if I maybe reading too much into that.
And I know what you mean, but in terms of from what I could gather for the highlights, it didn't feel like they'd treated them lightly. Like I thought Mark Weir
was amazing.
I mean, Mark Weir in goals was absolutely exceptional.
He's having a great season, Mark Weir. He's having a really good season.
He absolutely is. And I think on another day, Peterhead could have won that. And even I actually thought that the timing of Edinburgh's second goal. So I think Peterhead equalised maybe the 42nd minute, something like that, 42nd, 43rd minute. And I think even if he'd went in at halftime at that point, all square, I think the Edinburgh players, maybe Michael McIndoe, would have been thinking, this could be a really long second half. It was anyway, but the fact that Edinburgh managed to again gain the lead, I think in the 44th minute, then suddenly they very much have something to cling on to in that second half, very much have something to defend. So I do think that might have changed the mentality going into that second half. But regardless, I mean, 9 times out of 10, Peterhead do win that game.
I think so. The number of chances, they were profligate. Some of the chances that they had, like free headers inside the box, just, yes, Weir did very well. I don't want to take anything away from the goalkeeper because I think that he is having a great season, as we said there, but like saves he should be making. You know, if Mark Weir doesn't make those, if they go into the net, you'd be like, he should have saved that. And it seemed to happen. I think there might be about 2 or 3 instances in this one where really good chances were squandered because of like poor finishing. And conversely though, Michael McIndoe, I think this might be the first time where he's actually single. I mean, I'm a bit of a Michael McIndoe head, so I listen out to his post-match interviews. I think that's one of the rare occasions when he actually singles out players for praise. A lot of the time, where Dave will ask him like about certain players, he just backs off. He says, "No, I'm not talking about that." I said, "I'm praising everyone." But this was one when he really went out of his way to praise Mark Weir, but he also went out of his way to praise Connor Young. Connor Young is phenomenal season. Another player from Edinburgh who's having a phenomenal season. Mr. Naismith, please sign him up for Steny next year. But he said something about his chances. He said if you give him 4 chances, he'll score 3 of them. And I think there was one where he went through, I think it was quite early doors. Yep. Yeah, it was Peter Paul. It was right at the start of the game. Peter Pollitt sort of dawdles in the ball. You can't do that against Edinburgh because James Stokes was right on top of him, teasing Young, and you think he's going to score here, but hits it straight at Stuart McKenzie. But then I think the other chances that he had, it was three shots, 3 goals, unless anything was missed from the highlights. But he is just a player who looks like he's having a great time at Edinburgh. I think he might perhaps been, obviously didn't work out for him at Clyde last season, and I think that he might have fallen asunder when Clyde brought in all the new shiny toys in a bid to keep them up. But I think he's gone to a team where the manager has got the utmost trust in him, and he's supported by lots of guys perhaps the same age as him, guys who maybe looks his peers. I don't know, but they really seem to be bringing the best out of him. And the way that Michael McIndoe has calibrated that attack with James Stokes doing all the running and all the heavy lifting for him, it just works perfectly well for this Edinburgh team. And he's been the best player in the division so far this year.
I have been slow to come round to your way of thinking about Michael McIndoe, but I must admit I do now really enjoy listening to him. Yeah. You're right, he did single players out. There he went through, but my defence, magnificent. My midfield, magnificent. Kind of went through everybody, but without necessarily singling players out. But what about Uzi C? Coming back, coming off the bench, setting up the winner. Do you know what? You know what I thought was very funny? I'm presuming you do. Do you follow Uzi C on Instagram?
Should I?
If you don't, this is what I thought was very funny. He announced the fact that he was doing a DJ gig down in Watford. It's the same day as Edinburgh playing Dunfermline in the Scottish Cup. So this is a man that really just kind of dances to his own tune. Yes, I play for Edinburgh. Might not be available some weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if that game finishes at the back of 5, you better get your skates on if you're heading down to Watford. Long way to go. But I would say that,
I suspect they won't be on the bench against Dunfermline that day.
I suppose actually, would you want to tell Michael McIndoe, yeah, can I come? I'm ready to play for you again. Oh, brilliant. Sometimes. 80% of the time I'll be available. Not if I've got DJ gigs I need to fulfill. But I think he's played about 30 minutes between the 2 games that he's been back. He was brought off the bench on both occasions, and he's directly and indirectly set up 2 goals, 2 winning goals for Connor Young. I think it was against Clyde the previous week. He doesn't really do anything to directly affect it, but he just does a run that takes the defender away, and it opens up that space for Young to run into and shoot. And for this one here, it's a punt up the pitch from Eden Lynch. And I think maybe Scott Ross could have done a wee bit better. He seems to let the ball go over his head. I think he's, rather than playing the ball, he's too caught up with the fact that C's running through. And yeah, it's a nice pass into Young, and it just takes a really bad deflection off. I think it's like Jason Brown, the inside of his thigh. Yeah. And it just kind of just the way it catches his thigh, the trajectory, it's just sort of too difficult for Stuart McKenzie to save. But nevertheless, that's a very, very positive contribution from Uzi C, and long may it continue. And I think that yes, he's very good looking, but I think he brings more to the team than just his looks and his DJing ability. I think that they need more bodies. That's something that we've known. And I think that McIndoe, said it on a previous podcast, I think he trusts his starting 11. I think beyond that, he's perhaps a little bit unsure of the players in reserve. But I think with C, is you've got someone, I don't think he's the best player in the world, but someone who's strong and fit and enthusiastic, and someone who you can bring on. I'm sure when he's up to speed, he might be playing more often, but someone who you can rely on to come off and make an impact. And you really have to say that they are getting their money's worth from him from the 2 games that he's played for them.
Yeah, I do hope it wasn't him. And you would imagine if he's a DJ, it might have been him that was in charge of the tunes while Jordan Brown was doing it. If that's the tunes he's putting on, Moose T, Horny, I don't know if I would travel to Watford to listen to that.
You'd like to think that he's got a wee bit more imagination than just playing like sort of like party songs. I don't know what came up next, like the Cha Cha Slide. Agadoo, Saturday Night by Wigfield.
Dario G.
Dario G, yeah. Who knows? Who knows? But we'll have to go to Watford to find out for this. Just one more thing to say in this game. I mentioned right at the start about Seb Ross's goal to equalise at 2 each. I thought this was a lovely goal.
It was really good.
I think it's the Cammy Smith. The ball's worked down the left, and he plays it into him, and he takes a touch and pirouettes at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And just as he's coming round, he stabs at it as he's leaning backwards. And I think it just catches I think it catches everyone off guard just how early he takes it. But it's just a lovely touch and a lovely finish. And certainly the kind of goal that you say, I didn't expect that cut to come. Really nice. I said it was my favourite goal of the weekend. I've forgotten Teti Yengi's goal already. Sorry. Teti Yengi's was the best goal of the weekend. This is the kind of goal you don't tend to see very often. So I think that's why I liked it as much as I did.
But that's fair enough, and a 5-goal thriller. I really enjoyed it.
And when Dylan Forrest scored the penalty, Hawaii 5-0 played over the Tannoy again.
So Hawaii, funnily enough, Hawaii 5-0 at the first equaliser, and it was Dario G at the second equaliser. The funny thing was the Hawaii 5-0 had only just finished when Edinburgh went 2-1 up.
Again,
don't play Hawaii 5-0. Don't play any goal music.
It's just that's what Edinburgh are good at, that hunting and killing. Something that Michael McIndoe said we're really good at counter-attacking. I like that how when he gives his interviews, he's almost giving you like, look how clever I am. You know, look how I set this team, especially when he wins. Some people might think it's arrogance. I don't. I love it. I think the guy's absolutely compelling. I'd really, really like to go for a sit-down meal with him. Probably never going to happen, but I'd like to go for a sit-down meal with him and just pick his brains and find out more about how he views football. But they should be absolutely over the moon with how this season's going so far. You know, from having said right back at the beginning, after that match when Clyde played them, there you go. They've played Clyde. Clyde beat them, was it 5-0, 6-0 in the League Cup? And then comes to the league, they've beaten Clyde and drawn with them. And they only lost thanks to that. They only conceded that penalty at the end thanks to a daft tackle that would probably never normally happen. But I think by their standards, this has been a phenomenal season.
Yeah, very much so. I don't know if I would like to go for a sit-down meal with Michael McIndoe, but I would like you to go for a sit-down meal with him and then tell me about it.
I think we need someone else. I think we'd have to bring Dave along just as to meet in the middle. Someone who I've met, someone who McIndoe knows, just so it's not
someone who you both trust.
Yes, someone you both trust. We stopped doing the Dave counter because I think it peaked at about 24. There was never going to be there's no point. Once McIndoe is aware of it, there's no point in bringing it back.
You say we stopped. It was 7.
It's 7. Was it 7? There you go. So certainly far from the 20 odd it was back when it was. Maybe it was just nervous in front of camera. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, I think it's for this is a great result for them. I mean, I'm going to ask a question here. I don't know what you think, but can Edinburgh finish in the top 4?
No. I keep thinking that they will eventually not plummet, but I do think that they will start to move down in the division because of games like this, and as much as this was. As much as this was probably quite a pronounced way that the game panned out, I do think there's been a few games this year where Edinburgh have been on the back foot but have got something from the game.
In fact,
there is
I'm
much to admire about that.
There was a game where we actually did it in the podcast. We drew 2 each with Bonnyrigg, and I think that Mark Weir made. There was one save in particular. I think I compared it to David Seaman against Sheffield United in the FA Cup all those years ago. It was a ridiculous performance. Bonnyrigg should have been like out of sight, and that was a Bonnyrigg team that had played almost the entire second half with 10 men. do you know? So it's. But at what point though, Shaughan, do you just think that? I don't know here. I don't know. I mean, if you look at their league results, Shaughan, at the moment, that's 4 wins out of the last 5.
5 wins out of 6. Michael McIndoe does correct Dave, but I think that's in all competitions.
Yes, aye.
Listen, they're doing exceptionally well, and they will have far too much to get involved in the nonsense at the bottom of the table. But no, I mean, they would have to have a shed load of luck to get in the top 4. I think.
It's funny because they're playing East Fife at the weekend, and it's 2 teams in very contrasting form. We mentioned about Edinburgh's good form, and East Fife are the complete opposite. They're flatlining. They lost 3-1 to Clyde at the weekend. That was Darren Young's first victory since taking charge of the Billy Wee. But we were texting on the Sunday afternoon about Dick Campbell's post-match interview. Strange post-match interview where he started at one point talking about the Bosman ruling and the transfer windows. But one of the things that I've focused on in this aspect is that he talked about the number of players that he's got injured. He said 6 players are injured, 6 players who would walk into any team in the division. Maybe, certainly in Nathan Dawson's case. But he said that the second quarter isn't going to be very clever. So he's effectively warning people that because of our low numbers, we might get a couple of tankings here. This is perhaps the most inopportune time to have to go to Meadowbank.
Yeah, and that, actually, as much as I'm saying that, I think that Edinburgh have been a wee bit lucky this season and may need to continue that if they're going to get results. Actually, I quite fancy them to beat East Fife this weekend. East Fife without Austin and without Troughton are, as you would expect, a far inferior side, and unless I don't know if Troughton's available. I think Austin might have kind of done something to his shoulder or his arm and might be out for another few weeks. So no, as much as I've kind of suggested that Edinburgh might be a wee bit lucky, I'd say would not be surprised at all if Edinburgh get another 3 points at the weekend.
And Forth Athletic, Peterhead.
Peterhead.
Yeah. I think you're right in what you say that Peterhead, I think it was just like one of those days for them, because any other day that they win that, and I think that you could see just the frustration when Young's final goal went in there. I think there's about 3 players in camera all just collapsed.
Yep.
Like Sami Kafur at the end of the 1999 Champions League final. But this is the game. I think if Peterhead go out and play exactly the same way, they can beat Forfar. I mean, Forfar not having a great season. We've got rid of Ray McKinnon. We're not seeing any upturn in form yet since then. So you think that for both Edinburgh and Peterhead, their next games, you'd be looking, we can get 3 points from this.
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent. Well, I think that's us, Shaughan. That should do us for the time being.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, as we mentioned, we've spoken about the Terrace Patreon. We've done that a number of times. There's the podcast about Airdrieonians that's up there, the podcast about Dumbarton. And Shaughan and I are going off to record. It's something that we've never really quite done before. We're ranking the championship managers on a tier list. So I'm sure most people will know what a tier list is, where you work between S and F and just rank them. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do one for the Championship, then one for League One and one for League Two. So that'll be a nice, interesting 30 minutes of us telling you why John McGlynn's in the S tier. I think we can probably both agree with that. There's no real spoilers there. He's done very well for Falkirk so far. If you do want to listen to that, please go to patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. I think.
Don't look at me.
Don't look at that. I'm just trying to remember. Is that what Fowler says at the end of podcasts? Maybe.
I'm sure you can Google it and find it. Regardless.
Yeah. It's certainly worth doing because there's hours of podcasts up there. I think in my feed, I've seen 3 go up already this week. So you do get value for money there. So please go and do that. But Shaughan, I think that's us for the time being.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's plenty of football taking place this weekend, and we really hope you enjoy yourselves. But unlike Charles Green, who horrendous the way he spoke to Imran Ahmed at times, even if it was in jest, just do so respectfully. That's all we can ask. Thank you. Take care. Good night. God bless.